program evaluations for NSF with University of Idaho. Rural education is our entire focus because most of our schools outside of Anchorage are off-road and pretty remote. So it's really nice to find this organization. I look forward to hearing. And I was going to say, I have an EDD, and my dissertation was posted on ProQuest like years and years ago, so that shouldn't be something new. I was kind of surprised to hear that they were announcing that as a new thing. I had my EDD dissertation posted with them, like I says, see from my hair, long time ago.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ed. I discovered that was the case when I ran into some that were published, and it was a matter of working through our Office of Graduate Education and a fear that the Office of Graduate Education would then tell the college what it had to look like, which is not the case at all. Any dissertation that's ever been completed can be uploaded into ProQuest, even if it's 20 or 30 years later, as long as you have the right paperwork.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm James Bartlett. I'm at North Carolina State University, even though I have the Clemson sweatshirt on, but I direct the doctoral program for Community College Executive Leadership, and I'm the director of academic programs for the Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research. And we have a number of rural community colleges in North Carolina, so this is an exciting group to be able to be involved with.
Hi, I'm Sarah Zuckerman. I'm an assistant professor in ed leadership at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I also coordinate our EDD program and teach in the master's EDD and PhD programs. And I have an interest in rural education here, and it's a big portion of our state.
I'm Kristen Huggins, and I'm an associate professor of educational leadership at Washington State University and the EDD coordinator and the master's and certification coordinator on this campus. So I've been a part of the RZLNIC for a while, and I've really enjoyed the networking. It's good to see everyone serving rural schools.
I'm Susan Curtin. I'm associate professor at the University of South Dakota, and I coordinate the Masters in EDS for principal and teach and advise in the EDD program.
Is it my turn? Hi, I'm Guy Trainin. I'm also from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, a different department. I'm department chair at the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Teacher Education. And this is my first time with this group, having heard about it a short time ago. My interest in rural comes from two directions on the personal level. Obviously, as a department, we have an EDD and an MED program that's designed to serve rural teachers. But on top of that, I have two other areas of interest that are directly related, and one is based on all the conversations we're having within the state, making sure that we can serve our rural districts and make sure that we have an answer to teacher shortages. So even areas where we actually have a surplus of teachers, very few teachers who don't come from rural areas want to go back to rural areas. So this is a problem we're working on. And we're also working on computer science education and the way it can serve rural areas. So that's where I come from.
I think it's Fayaz.
Yeah.
We have a couple of people to go, I think. By the way, I'm feeling very honored to be among all the scholars, and my name is Fayaz, graduate research assistant with Dr. Hizbul, second year PhD student at the University of Denver.
And I'm Parker Morse Andrioli. I am a graduate research assistant to Dr. Hans Klar at Clemson University and doctoral candidate. And I echo Fayaz's sentiments of feeling very fortunate to be here. So thank you.
Okay, I'm not used to this unmuting and muting world. Thank you, everybody. It's great to have you, and I echo the sentiment. You guys are amazingly spectacular. Okay, click. When we were deciding, we've been having webinars for quite some time now this academic year, and this was really the last one. And I'm not going to do the 1 minute right, but I do want us to think about some reflecting on our innovative spirit, our continuing opportunities to network together, how we're having to rethink education, and how we're being creative to think about connecting and learning from others. And so I just wanted to open this up until, so we can have a little conversation as a whole group. We're going to break up into a little small group activity in a minute, but just kind of, I want to just hear from a few people and not talk myself about the new normal that we're living in. I've struggled myself to try to think of ways to keep myself occupied, except burdening myself with more work that we're doing anyway. I found a very cool app called Be My Eyes, which is for people who have vision impairments, and they log on and they click and you get a little call and you can read labels for people or direct people down aisles at grocery stores. It's very, very cool. So that's one thing that I've kind of a new opportunity for me to get out of my bubble and try to think of new ways to connect with people and help people, really. And so I just wanted to open that up for a minute. If you could consider some of these colorful phrases and maybe share a reflection about your new normal.
I work with a consortium of rural K through 12 school divisions in southwest corner of Virginia. And when all of this came upon them, as they were thinking about what they needed to do to continue instruction with their students remotely, rather than trying to just think about the next week or the next 6 weeks or the next 8 weeks, they put in place structures so that regardless of how long this lasts, they've got enduring things that will allow them to continue to support children remotely. And as well, if we ever get back to anything that resembles the normal we had before, they have structures in place to support long-term sub situations, to support maternity leaves and other things that might place unqualified teachers, substitute teachers, into a classroom setting, but have resources that they need to continue a good education with children.
Great example. Other than a schedule of substitutes, what other structures do you know that they put in place?
Well, they have come together over the last 4 years, recognizing little tiny central office staffs that aren't capable of doing everything a central office needs to do. They came together and are collaborating on an immense scale as it relates to curriculum and instruction. There's 17 different school divisions that do all of their curriculum and instructional planning, formative assessment type of work together, all their data analysis together, identifying their top people across the whole region and having them provide professional development. But they are putting all of their curricular and instructional resources online in accessible formats, in easily usable formats, so that they're available to everyone. They're also doing all their professional development in modules, online modules that are accessible regardless of whether schools are open or where those schools are.
They've discovered our secret. It's like the world is discovering what we've been doing forever, right? We just do it a lot better. Who else?
I'd like to share two things that emerged as this was going. And we had a conversation with administrators and a panel with administrators and teachers from different districts. And it was very clear from our rural partners across the state that they have recognized that whoever was there before, right? Whoever had structures already set in place and some training, the transition was really fairly smooth. I mean, it wasn't smooth for anybody, let's be honest. Definitely not the grades that I work with a lot of teachers in the elementary level, and the thoughts about what happens to kindergarten and to first grade and all that are very different than what I experienced with my own kids being in middle school and high school. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is the reflection by most teachers that we have been calling for a variety of reasons. And we've actually seen, especially in one-room schoolhouses and places like that, that the idea that kids need to learn to be self-directed in learning and self-regulating is re-emerging in a way that now that we're really leaving them on their own to learn, we're seeing how much of that they do not know how to navigate. And that we can't just drop this on parents and say, you take care of this and it'll be fine, because parents have very varying abilities, and frankly, they have their own jobs, hopefully, that they still need to manage. So that's one piece. The second piece was, and this is just personal satisfaction on my side, I've been working on computer science education with code.org for a long time, and I've been trying to push them to do these alternative delivery models. They've been married to this. You got to get people into a room for 5 days every summer, or they would not be properly trained. And we've been pushing it, and that's true of North and South Dakota, Idaho, all of us that deal, Alaska, all of us that deal with rural districts. We said, this is not a long-term solution. Finally, with this, it was the last push to say we can deliver all of this effectively online and be able to move forward. So that was a great release. It kind of forced the issue in a way that was positive.
Those are some good reflections. I do agree that the transition planning is, we've seen that built into our dissertations now, dissertations of practice, about how can this be sustainable. And I think that you might have stumbled across a really ubiquitous problem practice for us is self-regulating in the new normal, maybe is how we should call it. Because when you were talking about it, I'm looking at heads out there going, self-regulation is one of those paradigm shifters, like technology. It's like skills that students can actually learn to use themselves. Who else? One more and we'll move on.
Yeah, I really wanted to jump in on this one because, well, this is now my 50th year of teaching, right? So I've been in this for a while. And my first, I was a K-12 teacher and then a principal, superintendent, and commissioner. And almost all of my career and my two kids, both raised in small rural schools. And your comments, Guy, really spoke to me. Mainstream education in the lower 48, it's really based on a factory-oriented deficit remediation kind of mindset. And those of you that have worked in one-room schoolhouses in rural areas, self-sufficiency and self-regulation, self-learning are just, they're in the DNA. And we find it very hard, as I imagine a lot of you do, when we recruit teachers from outside to come up, they come up with this, they think a multi-grade classroom is like a K1 or a 1-2. My district, when I was a SUP, my district was the size of Ohio. I had 11 schools with a total population of 360 kids. That's rural. And we could get teachers up and they were going crazy trying to implement lesson plans and instruction based on a teacher-directed extrinsic reward kind of basis, and it just doesn't work. And so I've become really concerned with our teacher prep program that we really recognize I believe, really inherent differences and really benefit of small schools. I worked in Wyoming. I did my dissertation out of Wyoming, looking at the whole time when they were doing the whole consolidation. A lot of you have probably been to the consolidation route. And we watched these kids come from these small towns into large high schools because they can get better teams and they can get better electives and such. And the loss is just huge. So anyway, I don't want to go off too long on that one, but it really is a wonderful. I find the small schools, rural education, absolutely refreshing, and I regret when I go to the meetings in lower 48 and they're just this remediation model. How are we going to make up for those deficits? It's just really
That's a good point, Ed. That's what I was thinking about that today when I was hearing about some students that need to make up a certain amount of content, which to me that sounded deficit-based, fact-based knowledge. You know, it's like, how many facts are you missing for that extra 2 months of school that they're going to make you go to in the summer? Kristen, did you want to chime in, and then we'll move on?
Sure. Are you talking to this? I think I'm the only Kristen.
Oh, I'm sorry. The other Kristen.
Okay.
The one in the far west.
I put it in the chat. I just said that some of our rural schools are thinking about equity and access differently than other schools. And so equity has definitely been a concern. And so I just put what one of our school districts has done in the chat, which has been unusual compared to the other districts in our service area.
And you commented that they're going low bar?
Low tech.
Instead of low tech, which
so
to me
they bring the sorry about that. My video went out, but they bring the materials to the students' houses and check on them and do phone conferences and those kinds of things.
We'd like to also welcome Dr. Beverly Irby. Beverly, would you quickly introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Hi. Sorry about that. I'm Beverly Irby at Texas A&M University, and so that's where I am, down here in Texas. Thank you for letting me.
Beverly, good to have you.
Had a little emergency with the department and some money and things like that we had to really take care of, you know. So sorry about that I was late.
Got to spend that money. Okay, well, we're going to move on. Fayaz, if you want to click on. One of the things that we wanted to do, and really, again, we wanted to kind of reflect back over some of the things that we've accomplished over the year that we've been together. And when Christina created that beautiful flyer with all the beautiful words in it, they really kind of struck me. And in terms of pivoting and transitioning, which is not easy, bringing engagement into the online learning environment, and then dealing with some of the traumatic effects that people are going through. And so I wanted to create a little breakout room. Fayaz is going to push you away randomly. I didn't have time to select which person would go into each, but I thought, just looking at time, I wanted to have a little bit of conversation, but I'm thinking 5 minutes, maybe plenty, so 5 or 6 minutes. And then we'll come back together and discuss. Each of you will be addressing one of these components. And so we will all be in a small group for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together.
I have also shared the slide link in the chat box just for your reference.
Okay, excellent. Thanks,
Yeah.
Fayaz.
And so helping them through their, either challenges or, as Carmelita said, like having them collapse, right? They don't know what to do. Sometimes they're single moms, they've got kids. And then in our communities, even the thinking through telehealth is strategies to get, like how do we get more people actually physically there, right? To work in these communities, because there's rural and there's rural and there's rural. And so we all work with rural areas, and we know that it's challenging, but then thinking about those cultural components makes it challenging. And then you cut us off when we were just getting into it.
Fayaz did that to you. Anybody else with Holly's group? Okay, I'm going to just jump into ours, which I was in the teaching and engaging online, and I mean I teach online anyway, and I've just been struggling because we've all of a sudden plopped our face-to-face part into the online environment, and with no real forethought of how that's going to play out for students. And Hans and Sarah and Parker and Susan gave us some really good ideas. You know, Hans mentioned that their EDD program is that executive model that we think that students really appreciate and love. The Friday night, all day Saturday. Come to find out, their students didn't really like that model. So this has been some new learning for them, and they've redesigned how they deliver their program based on some of the technology capabilities now. So that sounds very, very cool. And then Sarah mentioned that she's teaching online, but is going to take some of these engagement exercises like this one today and throw that on. Would anybody from our group like to chime in for a sec?
I guess I would just add, you know, one of the criticisms of online learning is students don't feel like they have access to the instructor, and they feel sort of isolated from the rest of the class. So we've managed, I think, to find a sweet spot between providing that interaction with optional synchronous sessions. A colleague of mine does optional drop-in sessions like virtual advising sessions. And then we have other activities that require students to collaborate in groups to, you know, create videos or do things like that that require interaction. And the feedback so far has been fairly positive in that. So it's that balance of interaction. But of course the interaction requires a lot more effort. So I try to balance that with opportunities to just do read and more individual oriented read discussion board or do your own sort of activity. Still trying to work it out, but I think the balance of it seems to be what is the best way to go at this stage.
Yeah, I think that we've got some tough competition out there now. So it's going to make us ratchet up our game too, in terms of just, you know, Zoom is not enough anymore. And then there was another group out there. I'd like to hear a little small report from you guys.
So our group focused on social emotional challenges, and we talked more about K-12 schools as opposed to what we're doing in our higher ed settings. But we talked about, you know, the children, the students that are at home, and you get into the Zoom session and the children have children on their laps. You know, so they have suddenly become the adults because the parents are gone to work, and so the older kids are taking care of the smaller kids. We also talked about how we started our session today with the encouragement that everybody be on video. And we had this conversation in a meeting on campus via Zoom with some colleagues on campus a couple weeks ago, and someone brought up the fact that many K-12 students don't want to share video because of their home setting. And so by pushing them to share their video, we're putting them in awkward situations and creating some social and emotional distress for them. But we also talked about those schools that are way ahead of the curve and have got things figured out pretty quickly, or had things figured out before they came into this and already had some structures and things in place that were important.
Thanks, Brad. I do think that we're all living in the second generation tweaking world where the first generation was laid out, kind of thrown out for us. And now we're here fixing it all, fine tuning. All right, those were some great reflections. Thanks everybody for that. And thank you, Fayaz, for working the clicker on this. We're gonna transition for a minute because we do have some new people to the group. And so I'm gonna step back into the world of improvement science just for a minute, because this, after all, is a networked improvement community. So Fayaz, let's move on to through that one. We'll have a little, okay, one more, sorry, I forgot we had that. Okay, Can everybody see that? You might have to get close. We're gonna have a little fun now. And I do this with my students when we talk about what concepts are and what they aren't. And so this was a very benign little exercise I do with students when we're trying to figure out what defining concepts are. And my talk, while you look at that, is about what a network is versus, and it's really not versus, it's as opposed to what a network improvement community is. So would anybody like to take a stab at trying to define what a squircle is? I have to say my master's students solved it in like 1 second. My doctoral students never solved it. I don't know if that says anything about our
lizard.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe, but let's, what are the defining characteristics of a squircle? What makes a squircle and not a squircle? That makes sense.
Oh, okay.
You got it? I'm not going to linger on it too long.
Dark eyes.
What's that?
The dark eyes.
Close, but no.
Okay.
Good. You're on the right track though, Ed.
The tail lane? No, that's not right.
Almost.
Circles, dots.
Nothing.
Squircle.
Squircle's a chameleon. Changes shape.
Okay, I won't make us.
The head shape. The head shape.
No.
I know. Listen. When I first saw it, I couldn't get it either. I'm sorry, you guys. It is kind of funny though. Do you want me to give it to you? Yeah. Okay. A squircle has horizontal lines on their body. Okay. Enough of that.
The first one doesn't.
Horizontal.
Horizontal
Yeah.
line.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it
Oh,
does.
the second one doesn't. Where's the second horizontal line?
Second one is a
You have
non-squircle.
really little ones. You have to
No,
really
I'm talking
look.
about the second squircles.
Oh, in the tail.
It's the tail, but you have to.
Oh, I can't see it.
Deb,
Okay.
you have to put your glasses on.
I got them on. I'll have to put
All right. Okay.
young
Well,
people.
feel free to use this with your students, you guys, because it is fun to talk about what defining features are. Okay, click. Because really what I wanted to talk about, and I want to hear from you guys, because it took us a while to figure out this. And it's kind of opposed to what we do now. So I'm going to give you a minute to just look at this, figure it out. The bolded areas are what we do now. The dotted ones are the fade out from the past. But that's what we used to do. So it's so natural for us anyway. I remember when effect size was just the biggest thing. What works clearinghouse? You see those yesteryears. And so this is Paula Mayhew's improvement paradigm. And I just wanted to bring us back to what a networked improvement community does versus what a network does. So in thinking about this, can we go, I feel like someone wants to jump in. So I'm going to open it up for a minute and just kind of give me your initial feelings about how we've moved and shifted and what we do and think about from the dotted world to the bolded world now. No right or wrong answers.
When we began this this networked improvement community, which we're learning is really more of a network, we were hoping that we would have a lot of partners in practice joining us as well in a kind of a research practice partnership. We found that many felt that they weren't adequate, that they didn't have the answers, that they were the people in the universities who did. We know that that's not the case, and that researchers versus users and the knowers and doers. So Hans Klar and Kristen Huggins have been spectacular and Robert Crow also in working closely with their partners in the field and bringing them they've attended webinars, they've presented at webinars, they've presented at national conferences with us. And they're the ones, I think, in my case, who have helped me to see things through really through better lenses about improvement on the ground.
Thank you, Christina. So you're talking about that middle column that says the dichotomy, never the two shall meet. And then all of a sudden now we're thinking about it as this integral, almost essential partnership that can't be broken, right? Because how else are we going to learn? It reminds me of when Ed Psych first came out. You know, we had psychology, which if you were all psychologists, sorry, but you didn't really have a context within which to study and use your work. But then all of a sudden the field and context of education came along, and this field of educational psychology arose, and it was the perfect match of context and application to me. And so it kind of represents that research practice partnership that seems to be so perfectly suited for. Anybody else?
Well, I think that this was published in 2015, right? So I think that, I mean, and I know that this is about, you know, our research and what we're doing for developing practice-based evidence, for developing evidence. That top one there on the implement fast and scale wide, and then the learn fast to implement well. I think that the situation that we have found ourselves in may not be the bold one at this point. I mean, where we have been. We've had to do both, implement fast, learn fast, and as the first group said, turn on a dime. I mean, we've had to do that. And I'm not sure that it's implemented well. I mean, you know, it's it's done
totally
and it's over, you know. I mean, not over yet. We're still in it. But
well, let me just jump in, Bev, because I do agree 100% with you, because this is in the perfect world. This is if everybody mitigates, which they are not doing. And so we cannot, I agree that we have not gotten here yet, because one of the ideas about networked improvement communities is that productive changes are then looked at across diverse contexts and implemented well across contexts. This is a networked improvement community, and we haven't even gone to that point yet, right? I mean, we're all doing individual improvement work, but it's not scaled up across contexts yet, right, Bev? And so this is, I don't want to say pie in the sky because we're recording, but this is in theory. It is a huge jump. It's an almost impossible leap to get to this bold thing. And so,
and Robert,
God love us. Go ahead.
So part of this, great, right? And I completely agree with what people have said, but I don't see a difference between what works in terms of what works clearinghouse and how to make it gold standard, that topic, right? Because for me, that was the problem with the What Works Clearinghouse, is there's no such thing as a gold standard. And if you can replicate it easily, right, then you're missing the nuance of community that so informs our work. And so for me, this is another model that like starts to get going right, and then it completely misses equity, it completely misses cultural differences, it completely misses context of schools and rural communities where we have things that we can draw on across the board from one another. But having been far too involved with the What Works Clearinghouse back in the early 2000s with some of that work, I found that as a federal program evaluator, and I didn't want my things in there because I knew then that schools would lift it and take it, and we would have all of these studies that are generalizable, they are replicable, and they are, white, middle class communities in suburbia. And then you take, say, this like pro-social education program and you drop it in the middle of Detroit, or you drop it in the middle of a reservation, and it doesn't make sense and it doesn't work. And then we say it's the community that's the problem, not the program. Because clearly, if it's a gold standard, it must be okay.
Holly, thank you so much. I got to say, when I was looking at this, those are the ones that struck me. I also do NSF program evaluation. We focus on universities and NGOs that are working with indigenous or minority communities to help them or to fix it. And it's been really tough to get those professors with all their good intentions to understand that knower versus doer and gold standard standardization just doesn't work. So what we've been developing on this, rather than replicability as the new gold standard, is we've been talking about adaptability, adaptability and cultural relevance. It really needs to fit whatever it is, and to be almost cautious of alarm bells when you look at the what works sort of stuff. That, like I said earlier in my opening comments, so much of educational teacher prep programming and educational theory development in the United States is based on some idyllic middle-class suburban model that I'm not even sure it works in those places. But
right. Well, and I think the point that you just made that I think is really important is having it like contextually relevant, where it even strikes me as like when we say learning to improve, maybe we need to learn to revisit our assumptions, right?
Contextualization is a much better word even than adaptability or relevance. Thank you.
Yeah, I like adaptability. I mean, I do. I really do. It's just, you know, not only being rural, but entrenched in a very cultural specific context across 10 states that I'm working in. It's not just, you know, North Dakota, not just Montana. It's, you know, tribal nations across multiple states. And of course, in Alaska, you know this. It's like if there's a gold standard replicable way to do this, it's not going to fit our schools.
And to break a little bit with that, maybe, I don't know. For me, what is replicable, going back to the right column, are the quality processes to support complex work. So the replicability is not for, here's a program and you do these 3 things prescribed from A to C and it'll be magic. It's that zooming out and saying, what are the processes that will adapt an idea or contextualize a series of principles to the community?
Can I ask you to take that apart though, Guy? So
yeah,
what's the difference between like here's the process that works, it's generalizable, it's replicable, and here are the processes that we know work? Right? So I see the two as actually the same thing, where it's just a different way of saying like if you do these things, like so refining quality processes is also a values like proposition.
So if for me, the part of those processes that support complex work is going to the community and asking, what do you value? What do you need? Then that for me is something that is, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm trying to think about how do you say, what are the procedures as you come to work with a community and you say to the community, we want to hear what you need. That for me is a process.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that I understood you clearly.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I think that's important to keep highlighting so it doesn't become just a set of instructions. And if you follow this, magic will happen. And we've all been there enough times.
If you follow this, all we know is COVID will happen. Right?
Yeah, well, you know, thank you all for being super critical, because I've kind of been critical in my own mind, being solitary and siloed in my thinking. And I'm loving how you're thinking about this. I mean, I do see how, like, Holly, when you were talking about replica, none of us can say that word. That we somehow we stay away from it, I think. But I think when they think about replicability, they also think adopt to adapt. So I don't know. Guy, I think that that's totally true. But for me, the network is all about us developing common measures, common inquiry methodology that we can use across contexts and diverse situations and populations to address a problem of practice, no matter what its facet is. And so maybe we're thinking about this more deeply than the others are.
So
Fayaz, go ahead.
Let me jump in quickly. There are several people who aren't with us today. including Kent Seidel and Julie O'Brien, excuse me, from the University of Colorado, Denver. They've been working with a group of 16 rural superintendents in the state of Colorado, who actually the SUPs began this group initially. They decided that standardized testing doesn't do anything for anybody, but it certainly wasn't giving them any important data. So they started doing site visits of each other's districts informally, and they started collecting some data, and then they really didn't know what to do with the data. So then they brought Kent and Julie in. And Kent and Julie have worked in collaboration with them. As I say, they're up to 16 superintendents, to the extent that they've now identified processes. They have a whole suite of tools that have been generated, organically, not by the university experts, but by the people in the field, which have included interviews with families, with students, with teachers, with leaders, with board members, with a lot of consensus building. And those tools are available to all of us in this RISL-NIC. They'll make that available to us. They were hoping to be on today, and actually they have a kind of a crisis, as Beverly did at the beginning. They have a crisis board meeting that they're on right now. But the state of Colorado has now passed legislation that they're going to accept their processes as alternative accountability measures. So we'll be happy, if you're interested, put a little note in the box, or we'll put a link out on the website. They're available now, Dr.
And they're on the website, you said?
Thank you, Christina. And just to wrap up this conversation about what a network improvement can do, Bryke, I just kind of copy and pasted this from a keynote from AERA years ago, but it's the idea that we do use disciplined analytic and systematic methods to test and reliable improvements. I don't call them interventions anymore. I've decided to use the word response program now. And so, I mean, we all changed in our language, but I just want us to continue this. This is our end of the year wrap up, but I do want to move into this analytic and systematic work that we really need to do. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Now we're going to just kind of open it up for anybody to chime in as we kind of wrap things up for the year. Who has a comment or a suggestion or a recommendation or any other comment?
Well, I think if any of you are advising doctorate candidates who haven't perhaps selected a topic of study, that this is a great time to consider these young teachers that were out in the field during this COVID, and to see what mechanisms they used to cope, how they navigated, whether or not they feel that the job that they were doing via this platform was adequate, and how they are internalizing that. Because teachers, they're deeply invested in each child in that class, and they have this desire for those children to do better. And even though that premise is there with regard to their profession, I think that if we were to talk to some teachers, now, that we would feel that they're having a lot of, they're having trauma, psychological trauma from the idea that this is not how I thought it was going to be. This is not how I'm able to serve these students well. What's going to happen to these students in the fall? And I think it would be important to understand how our teachers are feeling right now, having gone through this, and what are their thoughts as they look towards August, because they're all worried, as we are in higher ed, of whether or not they're going to be able to go back to what they used to see as a normal environment. Maybe we're not ever going back there, but it would be very important for somebody to actually canvass these individuals that are out there in the most rural remote areas where they felt like their kids didn't have technology, you know, without them coming to school, they didn't have meals. I mean, all those things really impacted these young teachers in a way that emotionally they're having to deal with that, you know. And what are we doing to support those teachers in that mindset right now? You know, I think that if we have attrition this fall, I think we'll all be able to say, gee, no kidding, right? Anyway, that's what I'm doing now with regard to these young teachers that I work with, and I've invested a lot of energy in trying to get them to be trained, and, you know, overcoming all the other barriers that they have to becoming a licensed teacher. And now they are a licensed teacher. They met that, you know, that critical point in their career, only to see so much just like evaporate in front of their eyes. And not only that, then the administrators as well, you know, that are in their first years of administration, and then having to figure out how to navigate an entire building, an entire district, to provide for these students. You know, I think about it a lot, I guess.
There's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of scholarship done on what's going on these days.
We're going to need it.
Yeah.
If this is the kind of thing that's going to continue, we're going to need to be able to provide some, you know, empirical data that shows here's what we can do.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway.
Can I piggyback on that real quick?
Sure.
So CPED produces a journal, Impacting Education, and they are getting ready to produce a special issue of that journal on doc students and their venture through their programs with COVID. So be on the lookout for a call, and if you're working with doc students who would like to process all they're experiencing through writing, you know, these aren't going to be research pieces necessarily, but be on the lookout for a call from CPED on that.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Anybody else?
We're working currently on a project, a grant application, actually, where, you know, we're going to hopefully be able to look at the differences in rural schools in terms of actually testing face-to-face instruction versus online, because, you know, in our review, there's just hardly anything in terms of, I mean, we'll have qualitative and quantitative, but there certainly is hardly, there would be hardly any quantitative data out there on that, and what we were forced into and our schools were forced into. So if we could do a little bit of control on that and try to just look at some differences, and hopefully, you know, I don't know what we'll find, and I don't even know if we'll get funded, but that's something that we're looking at on a mid-phase grant based on some of the, of course, let me just say, Holly, based on the moderate evidence from Whatworks Clearinghouse guidelines that we have to submit in order to even be considered, which is one of the absolute priorities that we have to go by on moderate evidence. But at any rate, we've got that, and from our other studies, and so we're going to be trying to look at that. So just seeing if there's any difference if we intervene and we provide virtual mentor coaches and science role models, mentors, and things for parents and families and family engagement and things of that nature as they're working online and as they're working face-to-face. So we're trying to figure out our model for that. If y'all have any ideas.
Well, I think it's great that people are focused on problems of practice now. I mean, you know, about I loved your phrase, what has been forced upon us. And it's like, okay, why not use scholarship in this situation? So, all right, one more, and then I'm going to have to close it. we're running a little over. We normally like to hold these for 45 minutes. We don't want you guys to think of this as an extra added layer of things you have to do. So we enjoy seeing you guys. If anybody has a last comment.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated Ed's point about rural school teachers and leaders being resilient, and they've drawn on this resilience and getting through COVID. And that's very inspiring to me, and I see it's our role, and we have an opportunity to continue to help them try to reduce the gap that some of them confront as a result of the circumstances. And so, yeah, I hope we can continue this conversation and keep exchanging ideas throughout the next year.
Yeah, my question, when will this pick up? When will this group pick up again? Does this go on during the summer, or do you guys start up again in August? How does that work?
In the past, it's been just during the calendar year, but we certainly could, if people are interested in continuing in the summer, we'd be thrilled to do it in the summer. We initially were meeting monthly, and then we met quarterly, and we're just trying to sense what people's needs are. The people who engage in this Rizzle Nick, as we refer to it, are really passionate about rural improvement and supports for innovative leadership in rural communities. So we're facilitating, but you're all driving. So you let us know what works best for you.
I think for now, for me, I think because of the situation that we're in, it might be helpful if we could meet again sometime in the summer. I mean, and also for me, I'm here, not going anywhere. I think we're all like, it would be nice to get together from around the country. I love it. I love it.
Well, you know what? Let's do it, because like I just said when we started an hour ago, I felt like we just met the other day, and so it's been a month. So we'll go ahead and plan on having something in June, and we will see each other and tell your friends. We want, if you have colleagues, tell them about us. We want to get bigger and bigger. We want thousands of people in the network. So, we have an intimate group now, but we are definitely open to sharing. Christina?
And bring practitioners. We think it's really important. We'd rather have far more of them than us, and that's a terrible dichotomy to say them and us. But we know that, and many of us as researchers have been practitioners. We know that we learn from the field, and as has been clearly described today, that the things that we learn are based in great part, predominantly because of cultural variation as well. And so we know that one size fits nobody, and that I think there's some really interesting studies that could come out of this group. We could write together, we can do projects together, we can do things that take a look at specific interests that any of you have regionally, or we can expand it. There actually are people on our list, on our listserv, in 43 states. So you all let us know, and we'll facilitate it and make it happen. And we're here to guide that conversation, move it forward. And we'll send the next invitation out. Fayaz is our amazing, phenomenal graduate assistant who is from Kabul, Afghanistan. He didn't happen to mention that. He is the father of a new baby. He was home last summer, and he has a brand new baby. And he's here. He obviously isn't going to be going home. We're hoping that he'll be able to continue to work with us for a while, but we'd like to, we'll send out a poll of some kind and see what's best for everybody. No one's going away on vacation. People are going to have, schedules, but perhaps can work through it. We feel it's pretty therapeutic and that we learn from each other. So we'd like to continue to try to find those common problems of practice and see how we can make that into an actual NIC and as well as network across our group and hear about the nuances that that people are sharing today. So we'll send that out, and we'll look forward to planning something for at least one meeting in the summer.
Yes, and the slides that we use today will be in the NIC. So Beverly, if you just, I'm sure you're a member of that, and they're in the resource, I think, right, Fayaz? Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, it's great to see you. Thank you for your input. Stay safe. Thanks, Christina, for letting me run the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And everybody, you be good to each other.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Nice. See what the guys can do.
That was amazing.
When Mama doesn't drive a train. No, it was quite the challenge.
Oh, fabulous. It's amazing.
Well, I was just glad
and the
that Fayaz was around to be my partner in this, because I couldn't have done it without him. So thank you, Fayaz. I appreciate it.
We couldn't do anything without our Fayaz.
I'm telling you.
I said 43 states because now we've got Alaska. Go
I
ahead.
know, when he said I'm in Alaska, I was like, "Ooh, yeah.
Woo! Yeah.
See Russia from my door.
To get people, to get department chairs, and Beverly Irby, I mean, there are a couple of associate deans in that group.
I saw. Yeah, that's good.
To get North Carolina State Community College. There's a lot of people with a lot of grant funding. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can come out of there.
Yeah, James just got a $10 million grant. So he's the head of their NC State